They said the auction in Dry Creek was just for livestock, but when Elias Boone rode into town that afternoon, the sound he heard wasn't the cry of animals. It was the murmur of men, coarse, careless, circling something they didn't understand. On a rough wooden platform stood a woman, her hands bound in front of her, a burlap sack covering her head. A sign hung around her neck, Debtor's Punishment. Elias reined in his horse, staring. The sight turned his stomach. The sheriff and a few locals laughed nearby, tossing out mock bids like boys playing a cruel game. $1, a man jeered, and the crowd chuckled. Elias swung off his horse, boots crunching on the dirt. He hadn't meant to interfere. He never did. He'd buried his wife 3 years back and had learned to keep quiet, to let the world turn without him. But that day, something in him cracked. He reached into his coat, pulled out a coin, and flipped it toward the auctioneer. $1, he said. And that's no joke. The sheriff smirked. You serious, Boone? Elias' voice stayed calm. Take the dollar. Let her go. A silence fell. Someone snorted, but the sheriff shrugged, catching the coin. She's yours to deal with then. Her debts are clear. Elias didn't look at the men or their laughter. He stepped forward, cut the rope binding her hands, and gently lifted the sack from her head. Underneath was a woman with deep brown skin, hair matted from travel, and eyes that looked older than her years. She blinked into the sun, disoriented. Elias handed her his water flask. You're free, he said quietly. No one owns you. Her lips parted, but no words came. Only a tear traced the dust on her cheek. He nodded toward his horse. You can come with me till you find your footing. I've got a cabin a few miles west. No trouble there. The crowd laughed again, but Elias ignored them. As they rode out of town, the prairie wind washed away the sound of mockery, leaving only the whisper of hooves and the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. If this story of courage and quiet kindness pulled your heart, hit like and subscribe, because what happens when she finally speaks her name will change everything. They reached Elias's ranch by nightfall, the plains dark under a wash of starlight. The woman hadn't spoken a word since they left Dry Creek. Elias didn't press her. He showed her the spare room, small but warm, then set bread, beans, and coffee on the table. You'll rest here as long as you need, he said. She hesitated before sitting, hands trembling as she reached for the food. Elias turned away, giving her space. He'd known hardship, but he'd never seen silence so heavy it made the air itself ache. The next morning, she was already outside, hauling water from the well. Elias stepped out, hat in hand. You don't need to do that, he said. I do, she replied softly. It was the first time he'd heard her voice. Low, cracked, but steady. I can't sit still when someone's given me kindness. Days turned into weeks. She worked quietly but with purpose, feeding chickens, cleaning the barn, helping with the horses. Elias never asked her past, but he began to notice things. The way she flinched at loud sounds, the way her eyes softened at sunrise. At supper one evening, he said, You don't have to keep your silence, you know. She looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, When I speak my name, it brings trouble. Elias nodded. Then speak it when you're ready. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. You're different, Mr. Boone. He shrugged. Maybe I just remember what it means to be lost. Outside, coyotes cried into the dark. Inside, the small flame of trust began to flicker. Winter came early that year, sweeping across the plains with wind like broken glass. The woman, still silent about her past, worked beside Elias through the storms. They hauled hay, mended fences, shared laughter that slowly melted the frost around her spirit. One night, snow piled high against the door, trapping them inside. Elias added wood to the fire. If we make it through this one, spring's ours for the taking. She smiled faintly. You sound like you've been through worse. He chuckled. Loneliness is a storm all its own. Something in those words unlocked her. She stared into the fire, voice trembling. My name is Ruth, she whispered. The sound was soft, but it filled the room. Elias turned slowly. Ruth, he repeated, like tasting the word for the first time. That's a good name. A tears welled in her eyes. It's been years since I said it aloud. He leaned forward. You're safe here, Ruth. You don't owe me anything. But she shook her head. You gave me back my name. That's more than anyone's done in a long time. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, warmth spread like sunlight after rain. That night, they sat by the fire long after the flames dimmed, two souls who'd found something neither was looking for, peace. When spring came, the land awoke, grass pushing through the thaw, the river breaking free of ice, the prairie whispering softly under warm wind. Ruth moved through the ranch with a new rhythm, light in her step, laughter soft but alive. The woman who once hid behind silence now sang quietly while hanging laundry, her voice rising with the wind. Elias watched her sometimes from the porch, quietly in awe of the change that had bloomed between them. They worked side by side repairing fences, tending to the horses, and planting new seeds. The townsfolk still whispered when he rode in for supplies. That rancher's gone soft, they'd mutter. Paid $1 for a woman with a sack on her head. But Elias only smiled beneath his hat. He knew what they didn't. That love isn't bought, it's earned, built quietly with trust and care. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the open plains, Elias set 2 chairs outside the cabin. He poured coffee, handed her a cup, and said softly, You ever think about going back east? Ruth looked toward the horizon. There's nothing for me there. Here I feel like I can start over. He nodded slowly. Then start with me. She turned, startled. What do you mean? I mean stay, he said, voice steady but kind. Not as a guest, as my partner. My wife, if you'll have me. The prairie fell silent. Only the distant song of a meadowlark drifted through the air. Ruth's eyes glistened with tears she didn't hide. You don't even know the half of who I am, she whispered. I know enough, he replied. I know your name. That's all that matters. The sun dipped behind the hills, wrapping them in amber light. Ruth stepped forward, took his hand, the same hand that had freed her for a single $1 months ago, and nodded. Then yes, Elias Boone, I'll stay. He smiled, eyes warm. Then it settled. When they married, it wasn't in a church or a crowded town, but under the wide western sky. The prairie wind carried her laughter, and the same sun that once burned her sorrow now bathed her in light. She spoke her name again, Ruth, not as a secret, but as a promise. From that day forward, the ranch on Dry Creek became more than a place of work. It became a home, built not from wealth or pride, but from mercy, courage, and love reborn in the quiet heart of the West. If this story of redemption, courage, and love born from kindness touched your heart, hit like and subscribe. More cinematic Wild West